Learn how to use Django and the OpenAI API to create a ChatGPT clone, complete with user authentication. Tomi teaches this course. He has created many popular courses for our channel, and we even created a course together. So get ready to improve your Django skills and create a chatbot.
Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial where we're going to be building an AI chatbot just like ChatGPT. So we're going to use Django and the OpenAI API to build this. So it's going to be a chatbot where you can ask it questions and it's going to give you responses to that question. So we're also going to implement user authentication. So we're going to allow a user to register and log into our platform. And whenever a user logs out and logs back in, they're going to see the history of the messages that they've sent before. So I'm going to walk you through the OpenAI documentation, and I'm going to show you how to use GPT-3 and GPT-4 in your application by accessing the OpenAI API. So if you want to get the full code of everything that we've done in this video, there will be a link in the description below where you could get the full code to all the files we used and the whole source code to the whole project that we built. I'm Tomi, a creator at freeCodeCamp, as well as on my own channel, Code with Tomi. So if you like more tutorials like this, please don't forget to check out my channel at Code with Tomi, where I make more videos on web development and programming in general. So having that said, thank you for tuning into this video, and let's get started with this video. So the first thing that we're going to do is to first create a Django project. So before you create a Django project, you need to make sure that you have Django installed. So I'm going to do pip3 install Django. Right here, I'm on my terminal on my MacBook. If you're on a Windows, just open your command prompt and type the same command. But make sure not to type 3, just type pip install Django and it's going to do that for you. So I already have Django installed and it's going to tell me that requirement already satisfied. That's because I have Django installed. But if you don't have it installed, you should go ahead and install that for you. So now the second thing that we're going to do is to just create a new Django project. So I'm going to be assuming that you have a basic knowledge of Django, but if you don't have, you're still okay to follow this tutorial as I'm going to be explaining everything I do step by step. So what I'm going to do is to go into the folder where I want to create my Django project. So I'm going to do cd documents /projects. And I'm going to do cd chatbot. I created a folder named chatbot. And in there, I should have a template that says pre-template. So this pre-template is basically where I stored the HTML and CSS template of this project. I'm going to show you that in a bit. And what I'm just going to do is to say mkdir means I want to make a new folder. But actually, I could just create my Django project here. I could just say Django-admin start project chatbot. I could call it Django chatbot, Django_chatbot, and then I could cd into, let me just copy this, Django chatbot. And if I press ls, now I see that a new Django project has been created in that particular folder. And I'm just going to create a new Django app. So I'm going to say python3 manage.py start app chatbot. Now if I do ls again, you can now see that there's a new folder being created named chatbot. Now that everything is done, the next thing I want to do is to open this particular project on my VS Code or any editor, any IDE that you're using. So if you're stuck with what I did, if you don't understand what I just did, so basically when you want to create a new project in Django, you need to run a few commands, and this was what I did. I first make sure I have Django installed, because if I don't have Django installed, this is not going to work. And once I have Django installed, I just cd it into the folder where I want to create that project. So that was in my document and I had some folder in there. And then I cd into chatbot, which was the folder. And then I just created a new Django project using this command, Django-admin start project, and this is the name of the project. And then I cd it into that Django chatbot project. And after that, I just checked if a project has actually been created in that folder. And the way to check it is by doing ls. If you are on Windows and you're using command prompt, you just need to type dir and click enter. That is going to do that for you. But it shows me an error because I'm on a MacBook. And once we know that a Django project has been created, what I did was to create a new Django app in there. And I also checked to make sure the Django app has been created, which is chatbot. And that is what I did till this point. So what I'm going to do now is to import this project that I've created in my VS Code. I'm just going to swipe. So this is my VS Code right here. And I'm just going to say file, open folder. And I'm going to go into document. I'm going to go into projects. I'm going to go into chatbot, and this is the Django chatbot I created. So this is it here. Now, whenever you're opening a new Django project, you need to make sure that you open your project on the root directory of that particular project. So the root directory of your project is the folder that contains the manage.py file. If you see manage.py in that folder, that is the right directory you should open. So this is open and everything has been done. So I'm just going to cancel all of this to make sure everything is good. And yeah, so this is now my project folder and this is my app folder. Now the first thing you want to do to avoid any errors later is to go into settings in your project folder, and then inside installed apps we want to add chatbot. So I'm just going to say chatbot. Now this is just to let Django know that we've created a new app named chatbot, and that app belongs to this particular project. So this is the chatbot app right here. It's an external folder, but Django doesn't really see this as an app that is part of this project for now. But once we add it to installed apps, it knows that this chatbot folder is part of this whole project. So that's what that does. So whenever we try to call this chatbot folder, chatbot app, or whenever we want to use any file from it, Django has access to it. So that's what that line does. Now that we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is to just create our template folder. I want to take care of everything regarding our template first. So I'm going to create a new folder in the root directory. I'm going to name it templates, and in here I'm going to put my HTML files. And what I'm going to do is to just come into my folder. So I'm just going to search Finder. I'm just going to come into my projects. So I'm going to say projects. I'm going to come into chatbot, and then I have these two folders right here. These are the HTML files, and there'll be a link in the description below where you can download this and just use it and follow along with this project. So once you have that downloaded, just drag that into your HTML file. So for now I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go into this, and then the template folder that we created right here is the same thing as this template folder on our Finder, and I'm just going to paste that in there. So now that I've pasted it, if I come in here, those are right in here. So this is just the HTML template that I already built prior to making this tutorial. So I don't want us to spend a lot of time building out the UI. So I did this before, and you could just continue from this UI that I already built. The main thing I want to show you in this video is how to build the backend or the functionality of how this actually works. So this is the UI, this is the HTML, and everything is done. But the thing is, now that I have that HTML, just the way I added to the way I told Django that this is where to access this chatbot app, I also need to tell Django where to access HTML files, because right now this template folder can just be any folder. It will belong to anything. It might not even belong to this project. But once I tell Django that whenever we try to take an HTML file, go into this template folder, then Django is going to know that all our template files belong in this template folder. Now for you to do that, you just need to come into settings.py again, and you're going to come into where you see templates is a list, and you're going to look for DIRs. Now this dir stands for directory, and it just stands for the templates directory. So where do you want Django to look for your templates files? And I want you to look for it in this templates folder. So I'm just going to say base dir, templates. So what this is saying is that from the base directory, remember I told you something about root directory, that's the same as the base directory. That is the folder or the directory that contains the manage.py file. So I'm saying from this particular directory, go into templates folder, which is this folder right here. So now it knows that whenever we're trying to call or render an HTML page, it's going to have to go into this templates folder. So that is what that does. Now, I don't really need this no more. I could cancel out this settings.py. And the next thing I want to do is to just take care of the URLs. So I want to be able to go to my own page and then have this my HTML show. For now, if I try to run my project, let's run the project and make sure everything is working. If I say python 3 manage.py run server, this is the command that we use to run a Django project, by the way. And if you're on a Windows, once again, don't type python 3, just type python manage.py run server. So once I hit enter, it says you have 18 unapplied migrations. We don't really need to care about this. Don't worry, it's not an error. It's just something we don't need to care about for this project. Now it says our project is running on this particular port. Now let's just open it. So we could click on open, command and click. So as you can see, everything is working. It says that the install worked successfully. Congratulations. That means this project is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But the only thing wrong with it for us is that it's showing me this Django template. When I come into my home URL or when I come into my website, I don't want to be seeing this. I want to see the HTML templates that I built. So we're going to take care of that now. And the first thing we need to do is to go into chatbot. We can just close this. And in chatbot, we're going to create a new file named urls.py. So let's rename that as there was an error. So we're just going to say URLs. So what this does is that every single URL in our project, we're going to configure it in here. So for example, let's say this is my project and I want to have something like /login. I'm going to come into URLs and say there is a URL named /login in my project. Or if I just want to have a normal home page, which is just this normal home page, I also have to configure it here. Now let's do that. The first thing that we need to do is to just say from Django.urls import path. So this path is something that Django gave us that allows us to basically specify each URL as a path. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're going to have to create a new list called URL patterns equals to list. And then we're going to use this path that we imported. So we're going to say path. We're specifying a new URL as a path. And then I'm just going to have this. Yeah, I'm going to explain what this does. And I'm going to take from views.chatbot. I'm also going to explain what all of this does. And I'm going to say name equals chatbot. Okay, so now what this does is that when I say path, it takes three different arguments like this. And the first argument is to specify what path I'm trying to create. So this stands for the home page. That means whenever a user comes into my home page, let's say when I deploy this website to the web and I host it on something like www.chatbot.com, right? So this is my home page and that's what this specifies. If I do something like /login, then this path means www.chatbot.com/login, right? So I hope you understand what that means now. And since we know what that is, so this specifies the home page. The next thing is that what it's saying is whenever a user go to this home page, we want to render this chatbot view from the views.py. Now there's a file named views.py as you can see in here. And this file, so I'm just going to enlarge this a little bit. And this file, what it does is that it allows us to create functionalities for every single URL page. So what we're saying is whenever a user come into this home page, what do we want to do? Do we want to render an HTML page? Do we want to register something in the database? Everything is going to be done in this views.py. So now what we need to do is to create a new function named chatbot. It's going to take a request. And then for now, we're going to pass. We're going to come back to this. But what I just did here is to create a new function named chatbot so that when we're trying to call views.chatbot, it doesn't give us an error. So as you can see, it gives us this error for now. That's because we don't have views imported. So we just need to do from.import views. So that is done. So we've imported views.chatbot, no error because it knows that there's a chatbot function in here. Just going to collapse this. And once we have that, we're giving it name of chatbot. So we're just naming this URL chatbot. That's just what we're doing for that. Now I'm going to save this. And for now, I'm passing. And since we know what we've done, we can basically come back here now and remove this pass. And what I want to do when a user comes into this chatbot is to render this chatbot.html page. So instead of showing this, default Django template, I just want to show my own HTML page. To do this, I'm going to say return render, and I'm going to say request. I'm trying to request the chatbot.html. Now, because Django already knows where to get our template files whenever we're requesting for one, because we specified that in the settings, remember? Now it knows that it's going to come into templates folder and it's going to look for chatbot.html, which is this, and it's going to render that. Now, if I come in here and hit refresh, you should expect that to work, right? But no, it still shows this. Now, this is just because we did all of this for our Django app. But remember, this app is just a subset of the main project. So this is the main project folder. What we need to do is to come into the URLs of the project folder. And then we also need to tell these URLs that these project URLs, where to go whenever a user comes into the home page. We told the app, but we didn't tell the URL. So for us to do this, we need to do something called include. So we are importing include. And what this does is that it basically allows us to include a URL, kind of copy a URL from an app. So this is what we're doing. When I say path, and I'm going to do the same thing, I'm just going to say include chatbot.urls. So what this is doing is that whenever a user tries to go to the home page, it's going to go into chatbot, which is this app. It's going to go into the URLs file, which is this URLs. It's going to look for a particular URL that match this, and this is this URL, and whatever is being done here is what it's going to do right here. So that's basically what that does. Now we can save this. We can actually close this. Now when we come here and refresh, it works. So as you can see, it gives us this basic thing. I am your chatbot. You can ask me anything. Good. If I do nothing happens for now, but we're going to take care of that in a bit. So now that we know we have all of that done, the next thing that we want to do is, like, when we say something like, hi, how are you doing? We type something in there and we hit enter or we hit send. We want that message to show here. And we obviously want to have a response also. So I'm going to tell you how to do that now. And to do this, we're going to use a little bit of JavaScript. So I'm going to walk you through all the steps. Don't worry. Now we're going to come into our templates. Let me just explain what this template file does. So the first thing it does is to extend from this base.html. If you know Django, you know there's something named extend, and I'm going to go through it quickly. So this is a base.html file. This stands like the backbone or the bedrock of our template file. So this has all these constructors, every single thing that our HTML files need. And what it just does is allows other files to extend from it. So what it does is that wherever we have this thing called block content, any file that extends from it could basically add their own code in this block content, right? And it's going to have the same code as all of these, but with unique code in this block content. So if I come into chatbot, you see it's extending from base.html. That means if I remove all of this, every single thing from the whole file, right? So let me say I remove this block content, every single thing right here. It basically, let me remove this also. It basically has the same file as base.html, the same thing. No difference. But now if I add, just going to add everything back. If I add this block content, which is this, right, it's going to be the same file as this base.html, but any code I put into this block content is going to be inserted into this block content right here. So that means, so as you can see, this block content is in the body tag. That means this chatbot, all of this code is going to be in the body tag of this base.html. I hope that makes sense. So now this is a new file that extends from the base.html, kind of copies and pastes it. But what this allows us to do, instead of having to write all of this code again for every single file, and that's going to be time consuming, it just allows us to extend from it and only make changes to where we need to make changes, which is just the body of the page. And that is what we did here. So now that we have that, as you can see, this is the body of the page. This is just a basic form right here. It has a CSRF token. And in Django, this stands for cross-site request forgery, and it's kind of like an attack that it prevents an attack. So cross-site request forgery is an attack, but then this token kind of verifies that anyone that's trying to access this data is authorized to access that data. So that's what that does, and you have to put it there whenever you're submitting a form in Django. If not, it's going to throw you an error. So this is just the basic, this UI that you see right here. That is what that does. Nothing spectacular about that. And this is just styling it. This is just a basic CSS page to style it. Once again, there's a link in the description below where you can access this template file and follow me along. So now that we have this, we could close this base.html because we don't need it. And right now, if I type I, it just puts some random stuff in the URL and it doesn't really show anything. And as you can see, when I type I, the page starts refreshing and reloading. We don't want that. We want something generic, like when I say I, it automatically comes up here and gives me a response. That is what we want. So we're going to do that right now. To do this, we need JavaScript. So at the end of this div tag of the body, we're going to create script. And let's just end the script right here. So now that is what we need to do. And then the first thing that we need to do in here, we're going to first actually have 3 different constants. So I'm going to paste the code and explain what this does. So just to save time, I'm going to paste the code rather than typing everything line by line. So now what this does is that it selects a particular query. So what it does is it comes into message list. Cool. So I'm going to come in here and we're going to look for where we see message list. So in here, so we're just going to say messages, copy that. Let's search for it. So as you can see, there's a list right here named message list. And what this does, this JavaScript does, it just selects that particular query or that particular tag. So now all this old tag, this list tag, it has it stored in this constant named messages list. It does the same for message form. Now, if we search message form, we don't need to search that because we have that right here. We can see form, class message form. It basically has access to this old form and stores that access in this message form. So we can manipulate anything or do anything we want to do with that form because we now have it stored as a variable or as a constant. And the input, it does the same thing. So the input is basically this input bar right here. And as you can see, input text, and it has a class of message input, and it stores that also in a constant named message input. And now the next thing we want to do is to create a new event listener. So when a user clicks on submit or enter or send, we want to create an event listener that does something. So when this submit button is clicked, we want to do some stuff. For us to do this, I'm just going to also copy and paste some code in here. I'm just going to paste this in here. So as you can see, we're creating a message form dot add event listener. So now that we have access to that message form, we are adding an event listener. So that means whenever something is done to this form, this message form, once again, this message form is this tag and basically this form. So what we're saying is from this form, when the submit button is clicked, that means this button right here is clicked, then we want to do some stuff. First of all, we say event.prevent default, which means once the submit button is clicked, we don't want the page to refresh. That is what that does. And then what we're going to do is to then store the message that was inputted. So what we're saying is constant. We're creating a new message constant. And then we're saying the message input the value.trim. So what the user puts in here, we just want to get it, but trim it down, right, to only the words that it gets. So let's say it adds a lot of spaces and all of that. We want to remove all of that and just trim it down to the sentence. And what we're saying is if message.length is 0, then we want to return nothing. So that means if a user doesn't type anything in here and just clicks on enter or send, we don't want to return anything because they didn't send an actual message. Now that is what that does, right? And then the next thing we want to do is to kind of create a list. So when a user sends a message right here, so I'm just going to paste this code right here. Now, once a user sends a message, since we already know that once this submit button is clicked, all of this is being done. So after we check that and make sure that it's not 0, that means the message is not blank, then we want to create an input. We want to create a new, basically a new variable, right? And then we're creating a new element called list. Now I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is that once a user clicks on send, we want to basically show the user the message right here. Like this is the message you sent, right? Kind of like in any chatbot or any chat system, it's going to show your message and the person you're chatting with. That's what we want to do. So once the user clicks on A and he clicks enter, we want to pop the message up here saying you sent A, right? That is what we're doing right here. And what we're doing is we're creating a new message item and we're creating a list. So we're basically trying to duplicate or replicate what is being done in here, right? We want to make something look like this. So that's what we're doing in JavaScript. So we're saying, if we come down here, we're saying create a new list element. And then in that list element, we want to add a class, add a message named sent. So what we're doing is basically what they did here. So in that list, right, we're saying add a class, message, and sent. This is message and received, but we're going to kind of create a new class. So what it's doing is that whenever a user clicks submit, it's basically replicating this and just creating a new list, adding a class that says message and sent. That is basically what it is doing right here. So we get a new message item, which is a list, and then in that list we add a class, message, and sent. Done. And now the next thing we want to do is inside that list, just the way you can see that inside this list, there is now a few code in here that says AI chatbot. So this is sent by the AI chatbot and the message that the AI chatbot sent. That is what we're doing here also. We are saying this is sent by you, and then we are getting the message that you sent and just kind of pasting it there. So what we're now doing is saying message list.append child message item. So since we have message list, which is basically this message list right here, this UL, what we're going to say is under this UL, we want to append a child, and that child should be message item. And that message item is a new list we created, which has all of the information of the message you sent. So it's basically going to append a new child, kind of like pasting a new list in here. That is what that does. And what it then does after appending that is making the value of this blank. So whenever I say I and I hit enter, I don't want the I to still be here. I want this to be gone once I hit enter. So that is what that does. That says message.value, right? Now the next thing I want to do, I'm going to paste another bunch of code in here. I'm going to explain what this does line by line. I'm just going to paste this in here. And now, since we have the message that the user sent, we're going to send a request to our backend. So in this views, we're going to kind of send a request in here. So what we're doing is we're going to send the message that the user input and sent. We're going to send it to this backend, and from these views we are going to now create a function that sends that message to OpenAI API and then gives us the response, and then we're going to show that response right here. So let me explain what this does also. There's something in JavaScript called fetch. So we can kind of use this fetch to send a request to like an API or to like, your backend, in this case, our Django backend. And that's what we're doing. So we're saying fetch, and the method is post. So the method of this particular fetch is post, or this particular request. And we're just giving it the headers, which is what you need to do for this to work. And then we're giving it the kind of like the parameters we need to give it for it to, give us a response. So we're giving it a body, CSRF middleware token. Remember when we said we added this, which is kind of like preventing an attack. So we need to also send that token so everything goes well. That's what we're doing right here. Once again, the code to the template is going to be in the description, and the code to the whole everything we're going to do in this video, the full project, is also going to be in the description below. So you can check that out. If you're stuck anywhere, if you need to copy and paste the code, you can check everything out in the description below. And then there's also a message that we sent into this particular backend, and that message is basically the message that the user input, right? Which is this right here. If we come here, we created a new message right here, which is message input.trim. Good. Now that we're sending all of these, where are we sending it to? We're sending it to this home page. Where is this home page? If we come into URLs, this is where we're sending it to, and then it's going to go into views.chatbot, which is this function. So that means in here we're going to receive whatever we are sending, all these parameters, which is the message. Then we're going to send that message to OpenAI API. So let's do that. Now that all of this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to get a response. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to explain all of this, how this gets the response in a bit. But before I come back to this, we're going to have to first create a response in here, and I'm going to show you how it works. Or we can also just talk about it now. So what this does is just once we get a response, which is like when we say, when we get the message and then we say return response, right? Return response or something. So I'm just typing rubbish now, but you get the point of what I'm saying. So when we say return response, that response is going to be stored in this response variable, and then we can get that data, right? So that is going to return that response as a JSON response. And then we're going to say response equals response.json, convert it to a JSON type that JavaScript can understand. And then it's going to say, it's going to create a new variable named response, and it's going to say data.response, which is basically the data that we sent back from this, from our right here. And then what it does is that it basically does the same thing that we did in here, which is creating a new message so that it can pop up here. And that's exactly the same thing it did. And it also appended it to message item. Now enough talking, and let's get straight to the coding. Now that I explained what all this JavaScript does, let's actually come in here and undo it from this part. So now the first thing I want to do is I want to first get if the method being used to request for this page. So I'm going to say request the method. If the method is post, then I want to do something. So I'm going to do something. Now let me explain something quickly. If, let's say when we come to this URL directly and we just go to 127 right here, the method being used to request for this URL or this page is a get method originally or initially. But whenever we're trying to send a message, just like we did here, you can now see that this page is being accessed. If I come into fetch, it's being accessed with a method of post. So that's how I can distinguish from when a message is being sent to this page and when this page is just being loaded normally. So if a message is being sent and we do something like this and we hit enter, that is a post method. So that's when Django knows that, okay, I have to receive a message and provide a response. But if the method being used is just a get method, then it knows I don't really need to give a response or get anything. I just need to render this HTML page, right? So I hope you understand that. And that's what that does. And we're just going to come into views.py. And so we're saying if request.method is post, now we want to do some stuff. I'm just going to say message. So I want to get the message that was being sent in here. I'm going to say request.post.get. And what we need to get in here is in the body that was sent into this, our URL, we need to get the variable that was used to send, which is message. And then we're going to come in here and paste message. Now we have the message that the user typed in here. And what we're going to do is to now provide a response. Now the response for now, let's just say, this is my response. So the response we're going to use actually is the response from OpenAI. But for now, let's just say this just to make sure everything is working before we actually implement OpenAI API. So now we specify this response. And what I'm going to do is to return this response as a JSON response. I'm going to say return JSON response. So what I'm doing is to return this response as JSON response. But for me to be able to use JSON response, I need to import JSON response from Django. So I'm going to say Django from Django.http import. Let's make sure we're importing it right. Import JSON response. So now that's going to allow me to import JSON response. Allow me to use JSON response. So now that I have that, what I'm just going to do is to return this. I'm going to have my normal brackets, and in there I'm going to have the curly braces, and I want to return the message. You don't really need to return the message, but let's just return it also to make sure we have this message in the HTML. And then the main thing to return is the response. So we want to return the response as a variable named response. Good. So now this works. Now everything should actually work perfectly now. Let's test it out. If I come in here now and hit refresh and I say A, you can see that it shows me A and then it gives me a response saying, this is my response. Everything is working. Now we're able to actually send a message from our HTML and send it to our backend using JavaScript fetch. And then we're able to do some processing in the backend, send a response back and get that response. We've basically done most of the heavy work. Now the only thing we just need to do is to get into OpenAI and then get the API key, and from that API key we need to use that API key to basically access OpenAI, machine learning API that allows us to use a chatbot. I'm going to show you how to do this now. Now the first thing we need to do is to first make sure we have OpenAI installed. So I'm going to open this up. And what I'm going to do is to open up a new, or actually in here in my terminal, I'm just going to say, I'm going to clear this out to make sure everything is clean. I'm going to say p3 install OpenAI. It's going to say requirement already satisfied for me because I have it installed. But for you, it should go ahead and install that. Now, what this does, the basic thing that it does is just allows us to use OpenAI in Python. Now, before you even use any of this, you need to make sure you have an OpenAI account created. So you need to go to openai.com and create an account. And once you have an account created, you need to create an API key. So you need to go to your account and down here under user, you're going to see API keys. Now you need to make sure you have an API key. I'm just going to create a new API key to show you how this is done. So I'm going to create a new secret key, and I could just say Django chatbot. And you're going to create a new key. I'm going to copy that key, and it's done. Now this will allow us to use this OpenAI API to be able to create a chatbot. Now I'm going to come back in my code, and what I'm going to do is just create a new variable that says OpenAI API key. I'm going to paste that in there. So now, just to make sure I have that stored, I've pasted that in there. And the next thing I'm going to do is just to come into OpenAI actual API, and I'm going to show you how this works. I'm going to go into the documentation to show you everything about their API and what it does. So for this, we're going to be using the chat completion model. And what this does, it just allows us to be able to send a message and then kind of receive a response. But they call it chat completion, which is the name for this system. So that's what it does. You can read through this and understand how everything works, but I'm going to just explain to you how everything works in the code. So this is kind of like a basic system. You could go into their playground and play around with the API and see everything you can do with it. And there are a lot of other things you could do, not just chat. You could generate image. There's codex API, which is kind of like an API just set for helping you to code. And there are various APIs that OpenAI offer, but for this one, as I said, we're going to be using the text completion. So I'm going to quit this, and since we have our API key, I'm just going to come back into my code. So now that we know we have that, the next thing we need to do is to kind of create a function that sends a request to OpenAI API and sends it our message, and then we want to get a response from that API. So I'm going to do def, and I'm going to say ask OpenAI, and in here I'm going to pass it a message. So we need the message as a parameter, so we could send that to OpenAI. And now we want to get a response from OpenAI, and to be able to get this response, we just create a new variable, and we're going to say OpenAI the completion the create. So automatically we can see that we have this error. This is because we know we have OpenAI installed, but we didn't import it. So we need to import OpenAI to be able to use it in our code. So we've imported OpenAI, and that is gone. And after specifying the OpenAI API key, what we need to do is to say OpenAI dot API key is equals to OpenAI API key. So this kind of registers that this is our API key. This just stores the API key as a variable, but this sends that API key to OpenAI. So now that we've done that, we can come back to our function, and what we can just do is to say the completion.create, and I want to say the model I want to use. So the model I want to use, so we could just do this equals, I want to use the text DaVinci 003. So there are various models. As I said, you could go into their API documentation and their playground and check around with various models and everything you want to use. And the prompt is basically the message that the user sent. And the max tokens, we're just going to set a max tokens for it. Let's say something like 150, and n equals 1. You're going to set that as a parameter also. You need all of this when you're sending a request. You can also go into the API documentation, and you could know how to like change all of this to whatever value you want, depending on the cost of the API that you're planning to use. So we can say stop. Let's just say that as none, so it doesn't stop for any reason. And then temperature equals 0.7. So these are the parameters you need to specify to be able to send this or to be able to get a response. And now we're going to say answer, which is a response, equals to response dot choice. This is how we get the actual text response. I want to get the first one, right? And I want to say dot text dot strip this. So now if I don't do all of this, I'm going to show you what this does. So I'm just, before doing all of this, I'm going to print response. I'm going to save this. I'm just going to drag up my terminal. And now whenever, actually what we need to first do is to use this as the response. So I'm going to say response call ask OpenAI and send it this message. So instead of just sending a blank response saying, "Hi, this is my response," I want to send this particular message to ask OpenAI, which is going to get a response, and we're going to have to return answer. But before we return this answer, I want to just show you what this response is on its own. So let's just run that. I'm going to come in here, hit refresh. I'll say, "How are you doing?" And when I say that, you can see, because I printed the response, you can see the kind of response it gives us. It gives us choices, it gives us all of this, it gives us all of this, it gives us the text. This is the main response that we're looking for. So you can see we asked how it's doing, how are you doing? It gave us no for now because we didn't actually return anything in that. If I come down here, I'm just gonna come down. So in here we didn't return anything, so that's why it gave us no, but we're gonna fix that in a second. So now, as you can see, what it does is that for choices, it gives us text, which is the actual response. We don't really need all of this to show to the user. This just gives us information about the usage, like the amount of tokens we used and the model and all of that. But what we want to show to the user is this text. So this text is what we want to show to the user. And if you come in here, that is what we did. We said response.choice. So the response, and we went into choice. And from the choice, what we did, this should actually be choices, because that is choices right there. And then we got the first value, and that first value is basically this list right here, right? And then we're saying from this dictionary, and we're saying from this dictionary we want to get text. So we said text, and then we did the strip. So what the strip does is that it removes all of this formatting and just gives us in a normal text. So that is what that does. I hope you understood that. And then we're just going to quit this back. And instead of printing response, we're going to remove this. We're going to have our answer, and then we're going to return our answer. So now everything should work perfectly. So if I just going to refresh this page, I'm going to say, "Hi, how are you doing today?" Now let's wait. You can see now it says, "I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?" I could answer that. But what I'm just going to do is to test it out and see if this actually works fine. So I'm going to say, "Who is Bill Gates?" Now let's see what it says. So let's give it a second. It says Bill Gates is an American businessman, Gates, software developer, inventor, and philanthropist. Basically gives us all of the details of Bill Gates. So let's say, what is freeCodeCamp? Let's see if it knows everything. I'll give you a second. So it says freeCodeCamp is an open source online platform designed to teach coding skills to everyone. So this is basically a fully functional chatbot that you can ask a question and it could give you a response. This is very good. This was the point of this video. This is what we want to do in this video. Now, I hope you understood everything we've done up to this point, because for now we've been able to actually send a message and then get a response. So we could say something like, "Who are you?" And let's see, it says, "I am a human being just like you." Kind of funny because it's an AI, but that gave us an answer, which is what we want. So we've been able to do that in this video. Now that we've been able to build this chatbot, let's take it to the next level. So what we want to do now is to allow users to log in and sign up. And so we want to save chat to like a database, so that when I log in and I ask a couple of questions, I want to be able to log out, and when I log in another time or on another device, I want to still have access to my chat history. So we're going to do this. So for us to do this, what we need to do is to allow users to log in and sign up, and then we need to create a chat database. So whenever we make a user send a message and we make a request to OpenAI API, we want to save the message and the response into our chat database. So let's do that. Now the first thing we need to do is to actually create a login and register page. So once again, all this template file is going to be available in the description below, and you're going to be able to use that easily once you get them from the link in the description. And what we're just going to do is to come into templates right here, and we're going to create login. .html, and then so we have the login code, and we're just gonna put it in here, and then that's just a basic login page with the styling and everything. And then we're gonna do the same for register. So we're gonna create a register.html, and then in here also what we need to do is just to paste the register code, but you're gonna have this already, so you don't need to paste anything. So now this is just the basic code for the register page. Now we need to make sure that this has a URL. So what I'm going to do is to go into urls.py. I'm going to set login. I'm going to set register. And I'm going to do one more. I'm going to set the logout. I'm just going to copy this, paste all of this here. We need to make sure we have comma in here so we don't get an error. You just put comma and everything. Now we save that. So we need to create this login, register, and logout function. So we're going to have to come into views.py, and we could close all of this for now. And then, actually, before we close that, let's create a new one. So we could close these two, and then we could create a login. We could take a request. And for now, we could just say return render request login.html. Now we're going to do the same for logout, for register, Then we're just going to say register.html. And then for logout, we're just going to do def logout. We're going to take a request. And all we just need to do is to do auth the logout request. So this just allows us to log out a user. But for us to use this auth, we actually need to import auth up here in our views.py file. And for us to import auth, so auth is kind of like an authentication library that Django provides for us as default. So for us to import auth, we're just going to do from django.contrib import auth. Now that is going to work, but we don't need to worry about that for now. Let's just make sure that the login and register page are even loading up. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to go to /login. So as you can see, we have this login page. Let's go to /register. You can see we have this register page. So we want that whenever a user puts in these details and click on register, we want to register them and log them in automatically. So let's do that. Now the first thing we need to do is to come into views. Right here in our register page, let's actually close that bar. And then right here in our register view, we just need to do a couple of things. So first of all, if I come back in here in my register page, you can see that we have a basic form. If I show you right here, we have this form with a method of post, and it has username, email, password, and confirm password. And once they click on register, it submits that form to this page right here. So when they click on register, I want to get that all the details of everything they clicked on and submit it in my database. So for me to do this, just the way I used if request.form in if request.method is post in here, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I know when a form is being submitted to this page. So I'm going to say if request.method is equals to post. And what I'm just going to do is to say username. I'm going to get the username, actually not that. We need the username equals to request the post username. So let's just make sure that is username. So we're gonna have to do the same thing for the email. Request the post. We could just do email. Same thing for the passwords also. So password 1 is equals to request the post password 1, and then for password 2 we could just copy that and change 1 into 2. So let me show you what this is doing. Is getting from this form, this register form, is getting the values that the user input using the name. So the name of username is username. That's why we're getting it using username. We're storing it in a variable name username. Email is email. The first password is password 1. The second password is password 2. And as you can see, that's exactly what we're doing right here. So now that we have that, the first thing we want to do is to error check. So we want to first make sure that the user inputted passwords that are similar, that are identical, that are the same, not just similar. So we want to make sure that password 1, if password 1 is equal to password 2, so we want to make sure that password 1 is equal to password 2. So only if that is true, then we'll continue. So let's just say pass for now, we'll do some stuff. Else, if the passwords are not same, so we'll just send an error. For now, we'll just send error message. Let's just say error underscore message. And we'll say error message is equal to something like password don't match. So that is our error message. And then when this happens, what we want to do is to render this page again, but this time around with an error message. So say return render request register.html, but this time around we are sending an error message. So say error message, and then we say error message. So that should work. And what we can just do is we could try to test this out. So if we come in here and hit refresh, and let's say let's just do some random things. And if I do this and this, they don't. So as you can see, it tells us that password don't match. So because the password does not match, it just brings us back to this page telling us that it doesn't match. And that is working successfully. But now what if the password match? We want to then continue with creating this user. So the next thing we want to do is to just create this user. So we'll say try. We're going to use like a try except in here. Let's say try, let's pass for now. And then we'll say accept. And let's also pass for now. So in try, we want to try to create a new user. So we're going to say user equals. Now before we do anything, we want to make sure that we have the user model imported. So I'm just going to say from Django .contrib .auth .models import user. So this basically allows me to access Django user model, which is like the model or the table that Django creates for us to be able to store or create users on our platform. So what I'm just going to do is to say user, and I want to create a new user. So for me to create a new user, I'm going to say user.objects. So from the user module .objects .create user. So this is what I used to create a new user, and I want to create the new user using the username, the email, and the password. So let's just pick one password, anyone is fine as long as they are the same. So once that is done, I'm just going to save that user by saying user.save. So user.save saves that user in our database. And once the user has been created and saved, I want to log the user in automatically. So I'm just going to say auth.login request user. So I'm trying to log this user in right here. And then I'm going to say return redirect. So after logging the user in, I want to take them back to the chatbot. So I'm going to say chatbot. So this redirects me to the chatbot. Now for us to use this redirect, we need to import redirect right here. So I'm going to say redirect, and that allows us to use redirect in here. So now if none of this works, like if it doesn't create a user successfully, the next thing I want to do is to pass an error saying something like error creating an the account. So I'm going to say error message equals to, let's say, error creating account. And again, just like I did here, I want to return this page with an error message. Good. So now that should work successfully and everything should be fine right now. What we just need to do is to test this out. So I've saved it. If I come back in here now and I try to say, let me first refresh. Let me just refresh with this. And I say Tomi and I say tt@g.co, and let me give it the password and match. And I say register. It says error creating an account, right? So that means there's an error somewhere. So what we need to do is to come up here and see if they gave us any error here. Okay, they didn't give us any error here, but I just noticed something. So we haven't applied migrations. In Django, what you need to do is to apply migration. This is kind of like saving all these models that they gave us, the user models and everything. We want to save it into our database. If we don't save it into our database, there's no way we can create like data in our, or save data in our database. So first need to have a database before we can save data in that database. For us to do that, we just come here, cut out of this server, and we're just going to say python 3 manage.py run server. Nope, manage.py migrate. So once that is done and we run the server again, everything should be working successfully. So now if I try to submit that form and hit enter, you can now see that it logs me in. It says AI chatbot. I am your AI chatbot. You can ask me anything. So what I want to do is write here, I want to be like then I want to have the username. So I want it to be customized for the specific user. I'm going to come back in my code where I have chatbot and write in here, I can say and then I could just put the user that is logged in by saying user.username. So it's going to get the currently logged in user and tell me the username. Now if I hit refresh in here, you can see now it says Tomi, I am your AI chatbot. You can ask me anything. So this is basically what I want you to do. Now the next thing, once we know that this is working, is to now allow a user to log in from the login page. So we're going to come back to views, just the way we did for register. We want to allow a user to log in too. So this is quite similar but also very shorter. So the same thing we did by getting if the request method was post, we're going to do it here again. So I'm going to say if request dot method is equals to post. We're going to say username equals to request dot post. So we want to get that username and say username, and then we also want to get the password equals to request dot post password. So as you can see, username and password done. So if I come into login, you can see that in this form that we created, we have a username name and then we have a password name for the username and password input fields. So that's how we are getting the value that the user input. And once we have that, what we need to do is to try to authenticate that user. So we can say user equals auth.authenticate, and what this is doing is kind of checking if this user actually exists before we even try to like log the user in. So we're going to say request username equals to the username that we collected, and then password is equals to the password that we collected. So this just checks, and then what we can now do is to kind of say in here, we could just say if user is not none. So we are making sure that the user is not an invalid user. So if this user is in my database, I want to say auth the login. So I'm kind of logging the user in. I'm going to say request, and I want to log this user in. And then after logging the user in, I want to redirect them to the home page. So return redirect chatbot. Else, so the else means that if this user does not exist, so that's what this else is for. So we're going to say else. Then we want to say an error message, something like invalid user. So we're going to say error underscore message. Invalid, we can say invalid username or password. And then we could just return render. So we want to return and render the normal HTML template. So we could say request. And then we want to render the login.html. And then we're just going to say error message. And an error message. So this is what we want, and everything should be working perfectly. So what we're going to do is all of this should be working, but we can say else. That means if the request method is not post, then we could add an else statement saying we just want to render this normally. So what this is doing is, if the request or method is posed, then we go ahead and log the user in. But if it's not posed, then we just want to show the user the form. Now, once we've done this, we could go ahead and test to see and make sure that this is working successfully. So we could save this, and actually what I'm going to do is to first go to /logout. So it says views.logout didn't return an HTTP response, it returned none instead. So what we can do is, under logout, after logging the user out, we can just redirect them to the login page so they can log in. So now if we try to log out again, it takes me to the login page. Now let me log in with what I created and say login. Good. Now it says, "Hi Tomi, I am your chatbot. You can ask me anything." Another thing I want to do is to have login and register here, but if the user is logged in, I want to say logout instead. And then I could say something like "welcome Tomi," the username. So let's do that real quick. So in here, in the chatbot, what we could just do, we could basically even have, so I could come here in the chatbot. So right here where we say chat, it is right here. I could basically have another one, and I could say something like login. So first of all, I could have an A tag that says goes to login, and I could say login. And I could just copy that, leave some space, do the same thing for register. So I only want to do this if the user is not authenticated. So what I'm going to do is to say, I'm going to use like a Ginger template style, and this allows me to use like conditional statements in HTML. So I'm going to say if user.is_authenticated. So if user is authenticated, then I'm going to show them to just log out, or else I want to show them to log in and register, or register. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say end if. So now if the user is logged in, it shouldn't show us nothing. It doesn't show us anything under. But if we log out, right, and then let's say we go to the home page, so it should show us login and register. As you can see here, it does. We just can't see it because the background is blue and the text is blue. So we could come here and change that. So we could say something like style, color, so we could say color, and then we could say yellow. Let's see. So as you can see, it works. Let's do exactly the same thing here. We could just say style, color, yellow, and let's see if that works too. Good. So now it says login or register. Now I could come to login, and you see I don't see login or register again. Now what I can just do, instead of seeing login or register, I want to see welcome Tomi, and then after that I want to see logout. So what I'm just going to do is right here, instead of this, I'm going to copy this particular code, I'm going to paste it in here, and then instead of saying login or logout, login or register, I'm going to say, I'm going to have like a B tag that says welcome, and I want to say the user's username. I'm going to say user.username. So whoever is logged in is going to tell the user welcome, and yeah, I want to tell the user to log out if they want to. So I'm going to say logout. So this should work now. So as you can see, it says welcome Tomi, and it gives me the option to log out, and I could log in back again. It tells me welcome Tomi. This is perfect, and this is basically what I want. So now that all of this is done, we could now go straight to being able to save this user's database, this user's message into our database. So let's do that. Right now, I'm just going to come into my models.py file, and in here, I'm going to create a new model for us. So what I'm going to create is a model named chat. So I'm going to say class chat, and it's going to take from models.model. So now what I'm going to now do is to have 4 different fields. One is going to be the user, the other one is going to be the message, the other one is going to be the response that the AI gives us, and the last one is going to be the date and time it was created at, so we'll know how to arrange the particular data or messages. So now we can say models.foreign key. We can use the foreign key to link to the user on the user database. So we're going to say user, but we didn't import user here. So we're just going to say from Django.contrib.auth.models. Then we can import the user model. So now that we can do that, we can now use the user as a foreign key. And when you use foreign key, we say on delete, and then we say models.cascade. Now for the model, for the message, we're just gonna say models.text field because it's just a normal text field. We're gonna say the same for the response, so models.text field. So because it could be a lot of text. And then for the created at, what we need to do is to just say models.datetime field, and then we want to say auto now equals true. So that should work. And instead of it just not having a name, we want every single data to have a specific name. So we can use a method, and we're just going to have the underscore, let's say string, let's give it self, and then let's return for the name. Let's say self.user.username. So we want to get the username of the user that sent the message, and then let's say we want to say the message that the user sent. So self.message. So this should work. And now whenever we make any change to this models.py file, we need to migrate that change into our database. So I'm going to scroll this up. I'm going to do Ctrl+C. The first thing we need to do is to do Python 3 manage.py make migrations. So that kind of save the changes, but then what we need to do is to now migrate that changes. So manage.py migrate. Before I migrate, you can see that it told me I created a new model named chat, which is what I did. Now let me migrate that change into my database. Good. So now in my database, I have a new data table named chat. So now I just want to run my server again, and that should be working. But I want to see that I have created these models named chat. I want to verify it. So there are two ways. I could basically come here and then just open my db.sqlite, because that is my table. And if I drag this, you can see it says chatbot chat. So under the chatbot app, a table named chat has been created. If I click on that, you see it has everything we did: the ID, message, response, created at, and the user name of the user ID of the user that created this. But we don't want to do this. This is kind of like old fashioned. So what we're going to do is to use the Django admin that it's provided for us. So if I come here, if I come to /admin, you're going to see that there is like this admin page that Django creates for us. And what I want to do is to create an admin user. So right here, you can see that first of all, I'm logged in as Tomi. But right here, it tells me that the user I'm logged in as is not an admin. So it's not authorized to access this admin page. So for us to create an admin page, we need to run a particular command again. So we're going to do Python 3 manage.py create super user. So we can say admin. We can leave this blank and say admin. Yep. And then we've created a new admin user. And now let's run server. So now we could try to log in with that admin user that we created. Let's say admin login. Good. So now this is kind of how we can see like our database or all the users we have in our platform. So you can see we have two users, one named admin and one named Tomi that we created earlier. So the other thing I want to do is to verify that I actually have this chat saved in my database too. As you can see, it doesn't show here, but it shows in the SQLite file that we checked earlier. So for us to make it show here, we need to kind of register it on that admin page. To do this, we're going to use the admin.py file. So first of all, we need to say from .models import chat. So we first want to import chat, and then we're going to say admin.site.register. I want to register chat. So now if you come back in here and hit refresh, you can now see that we have chat as a database saved here. So that table works. So now that we know we have a database table named chat, what we can do is that we're going to come back into these views, and we don't really need all of these for now. But whenever a user sends a message, right? So in here, whenever a user types in a message, we want to save that message and the response of the AI in this chat database, so that whenever a user wants to check his history, they can easily check their history. So if I refresh this page, this should change to admin, and you can see it changed to admin because now I am logged in as the admin user on this platform. So that is also good. Now, the thing we need to do is to make sure we are saving and registering all the messages into our chat model or into our chat database. So let's do that right now. Now, the first thing we need to do is to just go back into in here. So I'm just going to come back in here. This is actually quite easy. First of all, I need to make sure I'm importing chat. So I'm going to say from .models import chat. Now that I know chat is being imported, so from chatbot, what I'm just going to do is to say, after getting the message and the response, before returning the response, I'm going to kind of like save that message and response in our chat database. So I'm going to say chat equals chat, and what we're going to do is to say user. So we want to see the user in here, right, that is sending this message, and we want it to be the currently logged in user. So the user that is currently logged in. So say user equals request dot user. So this is how you get the user that is currently logged in, by using request.user. And message equals, so we're saying this message, which is this message right here, we are saying is equals to the message that the user sent. So we're just going to copy that, and we're going to do exactly the same thing too for the response. So we're going to say this response right here, just going to come in here and paste that. I want to say is equals to this response from the AI. And then the last thing in here is the created at. So we want to know the date and time this was sent. So for us to do this, we need to use something named time zone. So first of all, we need to kind of import time zone. So we get the current time of whoever is using it. So if someone is in America, is the local time zone that's going to be saved. If someone is somewhere in Asia, is the local time zone that is going to be saved. So we want to do from Django dot utils import time zone. So now that we have that, we can come into created at, so right here, and what we can just do is to use that time zone that we imported and then save that. So what we just need to do is to say time zone dot now. So what this does is that it gets the current time and saves it as the created time. So now that that works, what we can just do is to say chat, just the way we save the user by saying user.save, we can also say chat.save. Now this should work successfully. Let's try this out. So we're going to save this, and then we're going to come in here, we're going to hit refresh, and let's also just refresh this page to see that there's no chat in here right now. But let's say I say something like, hi, how are you doing? And I hit enter. It gives me my response. Now I want to come in here and hit refresh and see, boom. You can see that now in this chat table, we have a new data that says admin sent a message saying, hi, how are you doing? Now if we click on it, we should see details about that. We should see that the user was admin, the message the user sent was, hi, how are you doing? And the response from the AI was, I'm doing well, thank you, how about you? So now that we know that we've been able to submit this data, every single chat, into the database from any user, now we could just show the user the history of their data that they've been chatting. So basically the history of their messages. Now what we want to do is that we want to show every user the history of their chat. If I refresh this page, that chat is gone. Even though we still have the data saved in our database, it doesn't show the user the history. So we want to do that right now. Now for us to do this, it's also very easy and straightforward. What we just need to do is to come here, and before getting the post, what we're going to do is to try and get all the chats of that specific user. So we're going to have a new variable named chats, and we're going to take from the chat model, and we're going to say .objects.filter. We want to say get all the chats from the user of the currently logged in user. So let me explain what that does. So what it does is that it returns, so we're just going to say user equals that. So what this does is that it returns all the chats in our database right here, everything that we have here, but he filters it. So he only returns the one that has a user, so that has the value of the user as the currently logged in user. So right now we have admin logged in. What it's going to do is that it's only going to return the chat of admin. That is what that does right there. And then we've saved it in this variable named chat. Now what we want to do is to pass it. To leave a space to make it look clean. So we want to pass it in here. We could just say chat. And then we could give it chat. So now our HTML here in our chatbot has access to all the chat history of this logged in user. So now what we just need to do is to now look for a good way to showcase it to the user, or showcase all the history to the user. Now what we're just going to do in this case is that in this URL right here, so first of all, let's just comment this out. We're going to come back to that. So let's see if everything is blank. Cool. So now what we just want to do is that we want to loop through for all the chats that we sent. So remember, in our views, we sent a variable named chat, and this contains all the chats of this currently logged in user. So I'm going to loop through all those chats. It's kind of a list that it sent to this HTML page. And I'm going to say for chat in chat. So once again, this is Jinja templating. It's like a format that allows me to use all these programming terms, all these programming concepts in a normal HTML file. So initially, remember when we use an if statement in here, that now we're using a for loop in here. So when we have a for loop, we also need to end that for loop. So before we do anything, let's make sure we end that for loop. And we're saying for chat in chat, even though we know that in here we only got the user that is currently logged in, we also just want to give it an extra security check right here also, to make sure that it's the user that is currently logged in that we are showing, just to make sure that there's no data leak or there's no problems in showing the right message to the right user. So what we're going to do is, after saying the for loop, we're going to check that is, so we're going to say if the chat.user, that means this chat that we sent, right? If the user is same as the request.user, the currently logged in user, then we actually want to show that message. So we're going to do this. We're going to end the if statement there also. And then what we're just doing is now is to show the message to the user. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did here. So in here, we could actually copy this and then all the way to here. We could just copy everything, to be honest. And then we could paste that in there. But we could comment it out. So we could make it normal. And instead of received, we want this to be sent. So this is the one that we sent. And we'll say by you. But the difference is that the content of the message should be chat, which is chat from this chat list. So we're going to say chat dot message. So now if I come in here, let's hit refresh and see. So now it shows me what I asked the AI before, which was, hi, how are you doing? But it doesn't show me the response that the AI gave me. So I want to have that too. Now what I'm just going to do in here, I'm going to copy that again. So from here, I'm just going to copy that, and I'm also going to paste that in here. I'm going to remove the comment by pressing command /, and this should be fine right here. But what I want to do, instead of chat.message in here, I want to say chat.response. So I'm going to say chat.response. I'm going to save it, come back here and hit refresh. Good. So now you can see it says, hi, how are you doing? And now it says, I'm doing well, thank you. How about you? Now I want to say, who is Bill Gates? And then it should give me a response of who Bill Gates is. It tells me who Bill Gates is, and I want to hit refresh. As you can see, I hit refresh and it still has the chat history, that I gave it. So I also want to log out. If I log out, and let's say I log in back as an admin, you can see that my chat history is still intact and everything is working. Now what I want to do is to try to be like another user. So I'm going to log in as Tomi. You can see now that I have a blank chat history. So since I don't have any chat history, what I can just do now is to say, hey, tell me tell me about the United Kingdom. And let's see what it says. So it should give us some details about the UK. And let's see, it says the United Kingdom is a sovereign state located of northeast. Basically, it gives us details about the United Kingdom. I hit refresh, I still have those data. If I log out and let's say I log in back as an admin, so let's make sure we're putting in the right thing. And that is good to tell us that it shows us when a user doesn't input valid data. So let's log in. And you can see it shows me my own data about what I asked, which was how are you doing and who is Bill Gates. And if I log in as Tomi, it shows me what I asked it about how United Kingdom is, or tell me about United Kingdom. Now what we want to do is to use GPT-4 in this our application. So as we know, GPT-4 came out a while after ChatGPT was released, and it's much more smarter and very much more smarter than the older GPT-3. So we want to be able to use that GPT-4 in this application, so any of the user of our application can get smarter response or better responses. So for us to use GPT-4, we actually need to change the model that we're using. So I'm going to walk you through the OpenAI documentation. So right here, this is the OpenAI documentation, and this just tells us about chat completion. So what we've been using was text completion, and we can also use chat completion. So the major difference is that we have access to GPT-4, and even the chat completion models are more cheaper. So those are the main difference. So that's why it's recommended to use this chat completion. I'm going to show you what you just need to do in the code. So this can basically do anything, right? You can draft an email, write Python code, answer questions about set of documents, do a lot of things. This is an actual chat model. So I'm going to show you how it works. So as you can see, this is an introduction. So this is how we call the API. We import OpenAI, and then instead of saying OpenAI.completion.create, which is what we've been doing, we say OpenAI.chatCompletion.create. We give it the model. This is GPT 3.5, and then we tell it, we have to give it like a role in which what is meant to do or how it's meant to be. So if I'm going to go into the playground in a bit, and I'm going to show you what I mean by a role. So as you can see, it says role. The system is, we're telling it that you are an helpful assistant. So basically, I can ask you anything and you should reply me. That's what we're telling the AI. And then as the user says, who won the World Cup in 2020? Who won the World Series in 2020? And then the assistant says the Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series in 2020. And then the user says, where was it played? And then the AI should continue that chat and give us a response of when it was played. So that is how that should work. If you see the response of this, you can see the 2020 series was played in Arlington, Texas, and it gives us all of that. So this is how this is going to work, and I'm going to show you in detail how we can implement this. But before I show you the actual code, I'm going to come into this playground, and this is what it is. So this is a user, and this is kind of like the chat completion model. And right now I'm on the model GPT-4. I could switch to GPT-3 or GPT-4, anyone I want. So what I'm just going to do is to say, who are you? So I could ask it that, and I could say submit. If I say submit, you see it says I am an AI model created by OpenAI. I could even delete this first of all and just start a conversation and be like, who are you? And I can say I am a human, and I can say, oh really? And then let's see what it says. I apologize for my previous response. I am not a human, but so you understand what I'm saying. It's kind of completing from the chat I already created. So you can do various things with this. Now let's actually implement this in our application. Now for us to do this, we're just going to have to come in here. Now everything we've been doing has been correct. All the models, all the chatbots, the URLs, login, everything is good. But what we just need to change now is where we are accessing or where we are sending a request to the OpenAI API. So as I said, the only thing we need to change is chat. So where it says chat, where it says OpenAI.completion, we need to write OpenAI.chatCompletion. So if we come in here again in the documentation, you can see that it says OpenAI.chatCompletion. That is one of the major changes. And the way in which we write this is going to be different. We really do not need all of this that we wrote before. I'm going to show you why. So what we need to do is just to say the model that we want to use. So first of all, let's say we just want to use GPT-3 3.5 Turbo. And then instead of having all of this, what we're just going to do is to set messages. And it's going to be like a list. So you see the way rows, you know, we first give it the role, and we see the way we have a list of like chats right here. That is how we're going to do this. But for this, we just want to have like 2 initial chats, or 1 initial chat actually. So let's just say row. So this role is kind of telling the AI what it is. I could tell it that you are let's say like a tax expert, and you're going to help me with tax, or you're like a lawyer and you're going to help me to write out some documents. You could do anything you want it to do. So let's just say role system, and let's say the content of that role, and we can say something like you are an helpful assistant. Good. Now we want to have another one, and this one is for the user. So we're going to say role user. Now this is the message that the user sends to the AI, and let's just say content, and the content is the message that the user sent, which is what we pass into this function. We're going to copy that, we're going to paste that in here. Let's just add our comma to make sure everything is good. Now that we have that, let's actually kind of see how this works, you know. So what we need to do is to say print response, because this is not going to work because it kind of gives it in a different response. So if I come back into the documentation, and if I come in here, you see that the response format is different. So in choices, the actual text that we want is choices.message.content. But for the initial one, we're using choices, the first index, and then we're using the text. That is not what we want. So let's just comment this out for now. And then let's return. This should actually be response. So let's return response. And don't let us return anything yet. And let's say print response. So what I'm going to do is to now try this out. And I'm going to say, so let's see if this works. So in here, let me show you what I did first. I made sure I printed response. So whenever a user sends a message to this GPT 3.5 Turbo, the response that we get, I want to print it in my terminal right here. That's what this does. So let's just make sure and see if that works before we actually show the user the response. So I'm just going to refresh this page. I'll say, who are you? And then it should give me a response right here. So it gave me no from this because it's not returning this function is not returning anything, but that's not what we're focusing on. If we scroll up, we should see the response. So this is the response, and it says choices, and we get the first one, and we can say the message.content. So now this is the content we want. We said, who are you? And he said, I am an AI language model designed to assist and engage in conversation with users. So that is good. Let's refresh this. You can see that it didn't save that in the database, which is quite good because we're not actually returning any response. That's why the database didn't get anything saved in it. So now we know that this is in choices, message. So choices has a list, and in that list, it has a dictionary of message, and that message has a dictionary of content. So let's use that now to get the actual response. So what we're going to do is to just say, so now we don't need to print response no more, and then we could uncomment this. So we could say response.choices, the first one, since it's in a list, we say first one, but instead of saying .text, we say the message.content, the strip. So now this is what we want, and this should be response. That was a typographical error. And now we want to return answer. So now let's see if this works. Let's try this. We hit refresh now, and we can say, who is the owner of freeCodeCamp? Let's say the founder of freeCodeCamp. Let's see what he says. So it says the founder of freeCodeCamp is Wcislo. Good, everything works successfully, and we are using the chat completion model, not the normal text completion model, which is good. So everything works. If I hit refresh, you can see that it saves, and in here in the database. So it doesn't allow me to log in because I'm logged in as Tomi. Let me change my login back to admin. Let me log in as admin. So now it shows me the message. Tomi said, who is the founder of freeCodeCamp, and I can see the response, which is good. So now if I come back in here, I'm logged in as admin. It changes all the message to the messages for admin. Good. Now let me try and say, when was YouTube founded? And let's see what it says. It says it was founded in 2005 by the people that founded it. Good. If I hit refresh, everything works. If I come in here, that was saved successfully. Good. Now, the next thing I want to do is to actually use GPT-4 in this. So as I said, GPT-4 is more smarter, much more smarter, and it gives more, it gives better responses. So let's actually implement GPT-4 in this application that we're building, and let's see the change that we'll make. So the only thing you need to do to change that from GPT 3.5 to 4 is just to remove this GPT 3.5 and write GPT-4. Now it should be using GPT-4. Let me show you how I knew that. If I come into the documentation where we have chat completion, so right here you can see the model is using GPT 3.5, but it says it that you can use GPT 3.5 and you can use GPT-4. So that's why all I know is you need to change this to GPT-4. And if you come into the playground, you can also see the name of the model GPT-4, GPT 3.5 Turbo, but now we want to use GPT-4. So now let's try this out and let's see whatever changes it makes. So now we know that we're using GPT-4, and then what we're just going to do is to come in here and just say, so let's hit refresh and say something. Let's tell it to solve a mathematical equation, right? So let's say, actually let's tell it to write a Python code. Write a Python code to check if a number is a prime number. So let's see what it writes. So we're going to give it like a second to come up with the code. And for now, GPT-4 is quite slower compared to GPT 3.5 and the other models. But we're going to give it a little bit of time to write that out. Because it's much smarter and it's quite new, it's quite slow. That's what the OpenAI said. The people at OpenAI said. And also if you use ChatGPT, if you use GPT-4 on ChatGPT, it's quite slow for now. So as you can see, it writes the code for us. You can use the following Python code to check if a number is prime number. So it tells us the code and the format. We could copy this and add all the indentation we're meant to add, and it's probably going to work. But as you can see, that is much more smarter. It wrote Python code for us. We could take this to the next level and format all the Python code. Whenever a code is being written, we could format it to make it look good. But for now, we've basically done what we want to do. Right? As you can see, it wrote a Python function that checks if a number is prime, and it basically explained everything it did. Even if it took a while for GPT-4 to do that, but it did it accurately. So that is the main thing, and that is the main goal. So everything we wanted to do in this video is done, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So that's going to be all for this tutorial. Thank you for watching to the end of this tutorial. And if you enjoyed everything we did, please don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. And if you want the full code to everything we did in this video, the link is in the description below. Check that out if you need the full code. And once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.